Okay. Okay. So I will go and to do a demo about the Edgify service that has been explained, and we already talked about it. So just one thing. So the Edgify service is a control plane that will allow the user to build this edge as a service on demand, so as edge cluster in different places, edge locations, across this data center cloud edge IoT continuum. So we can have clusters on the private cloud, we can have public cloud and public edge, and so on. And then we can deploy different kind of applications, so different type of workloads. So we don't have this, we are application agnostic, we don't have any, we are also vendor neutral, so we can deploy this application that could be virtual machine, or could be container-based application, or Helm chart on Kubernetes clusters on different types. So for example, public clouds like AWS or Equinix and so on. So let's consider a use case in order to show how we can use the Edgify service in order to build, to deploy application, to build resources on them. So let's say we are located in Berlin, and we have Edgify, and the first thing that we can do is to integrate in the Edgify our main data center that is as I said, located in Berlin. So these are our this is the company on-premise infrastructure. Then we need for our daily production, we need other resources that according to some requirements, that could be latency, could be privacy, security, and so on. We need other resources that are located in different parts of Europe, for example, in Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and on Westport. Okay, so in order to do this, we can use, for example, public cloud providers like AWS and Equinix, and we deploy edge clusters and applications in these locations. Now, the point is that, let's say that we have a requirement where we would like now to provide the same services for a customer or for customers that are located in the United States, and this is just for a period of time. So Edgify allow you to build resources on demand. So what we can do is, by using Edgify, to go into provision infrastructure in location based on United States. For example, in California, we use AWS service. Then for San Francisco Bay Area, we are going to use Equinix Metal, and then we can add also some on-premise, always based in California. So while we provision the infrastructure, the Edgify service then will allow you to also do the deployment, the application. So if we have, we would like to deploy the same application that we have in the Europe sites, we are going just to do this very easily, because as I said, this is application agnostic, and then we can deploy and so allow us to be interoperable and portable on different kind of infrastructure. Okay, so regarding the demo that I will show in a few minutes, I will start from this Edgify service, okay? And first of all, there is one tool that is called FireEdge. It is the graphical user interface that allow the user to use the one provision. So with the one provision, we can build and edge clusters on different locations. So for example, first of all, what we can do is to add the providers that are related to for example, to public cloud provider like AWS or Equinix Metal. So we build this provider catalog that allow us then to provision resources on the different locations. So for example, in this case, we are going to provision a cluster based on KVM on AWS, bare metal resources. And then we are going to provide also a Firecracker cluster on the Equinix metal resources based on Silicon Valley. Then after you provision these edge clusters on this bare metal location, we can access the marketplace in order to provide then the applications on the different clusters. Okay, so in order to do this, there is another user interface that is a graphical user interface that is called Sandstone, that allow you to manage all the resources, the clusters, the application that you can deploy across the Cloud Edge continuum. There is a marketplace that contains virtual machine templates or container-based application, also the services like Kubernetes clusters, and then you can use these templates in order to deploy Kubernetes clusters, for example, on a cluster based on KVM, or a container-based application on a Firecracker cluster. So this is, I showed you what will be the demo about. Now I'm going to replay a demo about this. Okay, so this is the Sandstone interface, the graphical user interface of the Edgify service. So I log in my username and password, and this is the dashboard. So from here, we can now manage all the resources. For example, in the cluster, as we said, we already deployed Amsterdam, Frankfurt, and the Western Port cluster. And also a couple of services have been already deployed. So we have the Kubernetes cluster that has been deployed on Frankfurt. And here we have the master and the worker node of the Kubernetes. And then an application based, for example, Nginx. So we can access this application, and that's the IP of in order to access the application. Okay, so as I said, we need now to provision other resources in the United States, because we need now to deploy these services. As you can see here from the FireEdge graphical user interface, there are already 3 clusters: Amsterdam, Frankfurt, and Western Port. One on AWS, one on Equinix, and one instead is an on-premise, so uses the on-premise driver. We have different providers. As I said, we are going now to use to provision resources on North California and Silicon Valley that we already defined the providers. So now we are going to provision a cluster on AWS bare metal. We select the provider in North California. Here we just change the name for the cluster. So for example, North California. And here we can configure the cluster. So we can select the number of IPs, the number of servers, the type of the operating system, the resources, and the type of virtualization technologies, and so on. And now the provisioning will start. So behind the scene, the one provision will use Ansible and Terraform in order now to create resources and configure the edge clusters. Here you can see that North California is going to be provisioned. And now we are going to provision also a cluster on the Equinix bare metal. So we select Equinix, in particular Silicon Valley provider. And here again, you can set the name of the cluster. And then here you can configure the cluster. In this case, we are going to select as a virtualization technology Firecracker. And here they start also the provisioning for the cluster, the edge cluster on Silicon Valley. Now, this will take some time. It can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It depends on the cloud provider and on the resources and so on. So in the demo, I will move forward in time for the next 5-10 minutes. So in order, and so now the resources has been deployed on AWS and Equinix. And you can check from the Sandstone user interface that the new cluster has been created. Once the cluster has been created, we can provision the same services on these two new clusters. So we don't have to change the service. We just instantiate it. What we need to do is to select the new cluster where we would like to deploy. So we keep the same template for the service, and we keep the same template for, in this case, for Kubernetes clusters and for Nginx. So here we are going to deploy also the application. This is a container-based application on the Firecracker cluster in Silicon Valley. So we just need to select the network, the cluster that is related to Silicon Valley. So when we instantiate, now you can see that both the master and the worker node will be deployed on the North California on AWS and the Nginx on Silicon Valley. This will take also a couple of minutes to be deployed. And here we can access with the public IP the Nginx application. And also I will show you how to access the Kubernetes cluster. So we can click on the master, select the public IP, and then we can connect, for example, by using SSH to the VM, to the master node, and then we can use, for example, kubectl to check the nodes of the cluster. So in this case, we have one worker node and one master node. Clearly, as I said, this is could be used now on demand. So we are going to deploy only when this is needed for a peak load or for some requests, some requirements. When we don't need anymore, we can delete the different services that has been deployed on the clusters. And then we are going also to delete the resources that are not going to be used anymore, and then they've been used only for this particular, for example, request or requirements that we had in order to satisfy some requests from some customer in the United States. So with one provision, you can then delete the resources, and then you will just pay for the time that has been used from. Okay, so now the resources has been deleted, and and you can see also from the cluster we will not have anymore the cluster that have been deployed. So I think this is concludes the demo about the Edgify service, and I think that's all. Thank you for attending.